Okay, good afternoon. I see we have a couple people there. Um, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
So,
I was on mute.
okay. I thought I would start off when I practiced this. This took about 15 minutes, and mostly I want these to be Q&A, but I thought I'd also do some tips and tricks um, in every one of these, assuming I have enough to last. So. Let's see. Here we go. So I'm going to talk about who's an XLstatements admin and how you control who's an XLstatements admin, and then what an admin can do that other users can't do. And then I'll just have a couple of Excel tips. And then I thought I would cover the optional arguments available in the balance functions, because we give kind of terse documentation on that. And then just a little bit on drop-down lists, and then show you a couple of features that most people don't know about. And just, I got one page talking about version 3. And then, like I said, mostly we'll do Q&A. And if you have any questions, just, jump right in. So an XLstatements admin, you will be an XLstatements admin if one or more of these four things is true. So kind of technically, the first one has to do with the security on the SQL server, and anyone that is in what should be a very restricted server role is an XLstatements admin. And that's what works even if you're using SQL authentication with Dynamics SL. That will be the only person who's an admin to start off. And then that person will have to set up one of these other instances in order for someone else to be an admin. And usually a consultant will be in that server role. And that's who we see as initially being the admin, in particular if you're using SQL Server authentication. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, that's fine. So the Windows account linked, there's a hard-coded user ID in Dynamics SL called sysadmin, and you can't remove that. And so the Windows account linked to that is an XLstatements admin. A Windows account that's in, and this is a built-in group in Dynamics SL called administrators, and I don't believe you can remove that either. But anyone in that group in Dynamics SL security is automatically an XLstatements admin. And then the last one, if one of those doesn't work for you, if you want someone to be an XLstatements admin, but you don't want to put the person in the administrators group, you can create a group in Dynamics SL, the administration part of it. You can create a group called $XLstatements, administrators $, and then any user ID you put in that group, as long as they have a Windows account linked to that, will also be an XLstatements admin. And that was new functionality we added about 6 months ago. So if you look at your version and you don't have version 2.5.15 or later, that won't work. So an XLstatements admin has capabilities beyond most users. So the drill down options, the ability to save options across all of your users. And this is only for new users. You can't override what someone has set up for their own options. The admin has another button there that can save the options for all new users. Adding drill down columns for all users, again, at that level. In order to do it at the all user level, you have to be an admin. And then there's a report available for added columns as well. And if you're an admin, you'll see added columns for all users. Otherwise, that report, which is an Excel sheet, will only be for yourself. And then there's more functionality on the setup screen. And so you could change the default SQL Server and system database, and then there's some additional buttons. And so if you're not an admin, the setup screen is what you see on the left here. And you see the registration key is disabled, the save to defaults is disabled. The reason why the SQL Server and system database are not disabled, and I was just talking to a site this morning who has 3 system databases and therefore 3 licenses for Excel statements. And this allows you to go in and say, oh, use this other system database. And then it'll let you set that temporarily until you leave Excel or change it back to something else. It does not override the default for everyone on your system. And then the center one is what you'll see if you're using Windows authentication with Dynamics SL. And so it's just like the screen on the right, except it's missing that user setup button on the bottom. And so you can see the buttons that are now visible. You can see save as defaults is enabled, and you can enter registration key as well. So remove inactive users. This is what you need to use. Let's say you have 10 licenses for Excel statements, and you have 10 users, and one of those users will no longer be using Excel statements, and so you want to put someone else in with that license. You need to be an admin and go to this remove inactive users, and that will let you select one or more users to remove from the list. And then, if you remove 2, if you had 10 names in there and you remove 2, that will free up 2 licenses, and it grabs a license and puts the user in that list whenever they load Excel statements and is looking at their Windows login. So the account they logged in, they were logged into your network when they first loaded Excel statements. It's going to grab that, and that's going to consume one of the licenses. And then the user's setup button, again, only if you're using SQL authentication, and that lets you link together the Windows accounts, the login accounts, and the Dynamics SL users. And that will open a little screen, and on the left, it's going to have available logins that it knows about that have rights to Excel statements. And on the right, it's going to have a list of all of your Dynamics SL user IDs. And then you just highlight one on each side, and then there's a button down below to link those together. And that's only necessary if, well, like we first said, if you want to make someone an Excel statements admin, then it's going to have to know what their login is and be linked to a Dynamics SL user ID who has who's in the administrators group or who's a sysadmin, or if you've created that other group we talked about. The other reasons are if you have the payroll module, you have a user who will be able to see some payroll detail on the drill downs and be able to drill down to a payroll batch will have to have view access to the PR transactions screen in order for that to work. And that's just sort of a subset of if you had modular security turned on in Dynamics SL, which isn't something that's done very often. But modular security, if you turn that on, that means people will have to have explicit rights to a lot of reports in Dynamics SL, in order to have full functionality. So if the person does not have view rights to the AP transactions report, they will not be able to drill down into AP batches. So modular security means that every XLstatements user has to be linked to a Dynamics SL user ID, whether they're a Dynamics SL user or not. I mean, they could be someone who doesn't use the program, but if you want to use modular security, you still have to go set up a user ID. And it doesn't mean that they can use Dynamics SL. And then give them view rights to the necessary reports. And then the other thing is if you have the budget option and you want to update a budget or statistical ledger, the button to do that is only enabled if you have delete rights to the budget maintenance screen in Dynamics SL. So we are protecting your data. And again, most sites don't use modular security, but just be aware if you have the payroll module, you're going to need the same rights as you would if you had modular security turned on just for payroll information. And then another thing that the admin can do is set up either modular security or compartmental security. And for those of you who don't know about compartmental security, we think this is a great feature. So that lets you filter what a user is able to see. And that's typically done by subaccounts or parts of a subaccount. And that way, you can have managers able to get internal reports in a self-service manner, and you just save the report once. I recommend saving as a read-only Excel file. And then all those managers, if they have XLstatements licenses, can open that same report and they'll see only their own balances. And when they drill down, they'll see only transactions coded to their departments. So Excel stuff, Control-Shift-A, I assume most people know about this because I stress it in the demos. But the idea here is the insert from SL screen names the cells. If you insert your company ID, your ledger ID, your subaccount, it will automatically name those cells. And it names the cells the same name as the parameter used in the balance functions. And so that means if you use Control-Shift-A while you're entering a balance function, and I'll jump over and show you some of this as well, then it will automatically know where to find those values, and it's sort of self-documenting as well. But the big idea for me is it saves a lot of typing, and in my case, a lot of typos in doing that. And then I follow that same convention. Again, if you've seen one of my demos, I'm going to name the cell that's got the fiscal year. I'm going to name that fiscal year because that's what the parameter is named. And I'm going to name the period cell PD because that's what the parameter is named. So when I do Control-Shift-A, it not only knows how to find what I've inserted from the insert from SL screen, if I've let it set those names, it also knows where to find those. So the other thing is a fill handle. This is something else that I show in demos. I use it a lot, and a lot of Excel users, even advanced level Excel users, may not be using that. So it's a real nice functionality, particularly in creating an Excel statements report. So Excel stuff here. The insert function capability, which is that little f of x symbol next to your formula bar. If you click that, that's going to give you a list of function types in Excel. And if you move all the way down that list, the last category, well, probably the last category is Excel statements. And then if you choose Excel statements, you'll see a list of the Excel statements functions. And if you click on one of those, it will automatically enter that into the cell you're in, and then it'll bring you onto other screens like this one you're seeing on here to show you what all of the arguments need to be and what they may be, and then a little help on those. So in version 2, that's the only real online help that we have. Version 3 is going to have a lot more online help. And then I kind of discovered this just a couple of weeks ago. If you're in a cell that has a function in it, if you do Shift F3, it will also open this, it will also open that screen for you. and that can be really handy, particularly if you're setting one of the options and you don't really want to count commas. You can just enter it on this screen and it'll automatically insert commas for the parameters that you're skipping. Okay, so optional parameters, and I just got PTD-BAL up here. So you've got include unposted, net, and consol. And so include unposted, if you leave it blank or if you put a false in or a 0, you're only going to see posted batches. If you put a true in or a 1, then that's going to include released batches as well as posted batches, and that includes batches in a future period. So if you're entering batches in a future period, you know you can't post those until you close into the period, but Excel statements will see those if you put true in for include unposted. And so I recommend using that for internal reports, because those managers or whomever then could actually, change the period to a period, in this case, they could change it to July, even if you haven't closed June, and they're going to see any batches that you've entered into on an AP, expenses against their department. They'll see those out there for July already, even if you haven't closed. And then we have another one too that a lot of people don't know about, and that will show you released but unposted. And so that can be kind of handy for a check, I don't know, at the end of your period, just if you want to go in and say, oh, do we have any unposted batches out there? And then in Excel statements, you can drill down and see what those are if you see balances when you've used that. So I know sites that on a trial balance, they'll put a column in with include unposted equals 2 for that column, and then they check that at the end of the month, and if they see any balances out there, they can then drill down in Excel statements to research what those are, and then know whether, oh, do I want to delete that, or do we need to post that, or adjust it, or whatever. So the second one's called net, and so blank or false means that any balance is going to have the natural sign based on the balance type. So, debit balances for your asset or your expense accounts are going to be positives, and credit balances, net credit balances for your liability and income account, or sorry, revenue accounts are going to be positive as well. And then you can put a true in, and that will kind of reverse natural debit accounts. It's going to show those as negative balance. And the reason for that, again, is internal reports. You're not going to do this for, a real balance sheet or income statement. At least I doubt you are. But the idea is for internal reports where you may combine income and expenses on one line, then you're going to want to make sure that one of those is reversed. And the reason we reverse the debit is because those are typically the account types you're going to combine on one line is your income and your expenses. So D, you can put a D in, and that's going to show you only debits to that period. And then a C will be only credits. So if you want a real old school type trial balance where you have a column for debits and a column for credits, you can use that. And then version 3 will have an option you can use with those where it will put the positive balance on the right side. So one side is always going to be 0, and it'll put the net positive balance, in either the debit column or the credit column. And then this is the biggie, consol. And by the way, even if you're not in a multi-company environment where you're doing consolidation, we have a lot of sites like that who use this with that C option. So they'll set up account classes in GL and then put each of the accounts in their chart of accounts into one of those account classes. And then they'll use the C option here to create their summary reports. So instead of making one line per account or using mass lists and ranges of accounts, they'll drop in a column of the account classes from GL instead of dropping accounts in, and then they'll point to those in their PTD-bal or YTD-bal and use that last argument as a quote C unquote, and then it'll automatically find the balances for all the accounts of that type. So it can be really nice for driving those kind of reports. It's great for consolidation as well. If you have companies in different databases that have different charts of accounts, it's a lot easier and I think more straightforward to use than the consol accounts, which is that one labeled A there. And a nice thing about account classes is you define those and you also put a description in, and so those rows will automatically have a description, which wouldn't be true if you're using consol accounts. Consol subaccounts, if you go into subaccount maintenance, you'll see there's a column there. It's a 24-character free column for consol subaccounts. And so again, if you're combining companies with dissimilar subaccounts, but you want to consolidate those subaccounts, somehow merge different subaccounts into one dummy subaccount, that's what that's for. And then as you go down this, you'll see it's basically combinations of, oh, are you using consol subaccounts with account classes? Are you using ratio groups or whatever, ratio groups? And then version 3, if you have the project option, it's going to have another option here. I think it's a P, and then it will use the account category that you set up from Project Controller. And then drop-down lists. I really want people to use this functionality. And so it automatically creates a drop-down list for something like, your sub-account segment or combination of sub-account segments. And we think of this as as analogous to the reporting tree in FRX or Management Reporter. And I'm going to show you some functionality there that you may not know about, even if you are using those. So here are some features that are poorly documented. And the first one I'll cover when we talk about dropdowns. And another is if you're getting those name errors when you open a workbook that was created by someone else, that means someone is going to have to fix the fact that the XLstatements add-in location is not the same among the workstations. And we have a white paper on that that we will send you if you want on how to fix that issue. But as far as fixing it and getting rid of those name arrows, if you go onto the report screen in XLstatements, and if you right-click on the disconnect button, that will automatically reset all of the locations to the location where your XLstatements is, where your add-in is. And then hiding all zeros. If you don't know about this, you're going to kick me. But what this lets you do is on a report, it will automatically hide rows that have all zero balances across your report. And I just detailed how you do that. Okay, and then just some quick on version 3. So it's going to have support an extra cross project option that adds a JTD-bal function and a bunch of other functions. I think it's about a dozen more functions that are mostly to go and get, what's the name of this task, what's the name of this project, whatever. The insert from SL tab, in addition to having tabs for entities and consolidation, will now also have a tab for project entities, so you can add those in from there. And then you can also drill down to batches from the financial functions. You can drill down to batches that were created by project modules, like time entry or allocator. So version 3, leaving aside the project option, the thing we're really excited about, and this is what took so long, is you'll be able to filter on almost any value in your balance functions. And so that's in the new JTD-bal, but it's also there in PTD-bal and YTD-bal. So you can filter on something other than what you can filter on now with mass lists and ranges, which are, as you know, company ID, ledger ID, account, sub-account. Now you'll be able to add anything to that you want to. And one nice thing about this is if you're at the point of saying, oh, we're going to have to restructure our sub-accounts because we need to add another segment to track, customer type. You can say, no, we don't need to do that. We'll use XL statements, and we'll just go in and we'll say, okay, and we're filtering on the customer class, and then it will automatically, you can break out a row on your income statement for each customer class, revenue by customer class. And you can do a lot more than that as well, but just as an example of what you can do. The second level drill down, which is to the GL detail, not the GL detail. Sorry. The first level drill down that goes to the second level drill down, in the first level now, if you double click on the header as opposed to one of the rows, it will give you the GL detail for all the rows in that drill down, on that drill down sheet. So you can also filter first and then double click on the header, and it's going to give you the detail on all the rows that you've left in that first level table. So compartmental security, you'll be able to block that at a specific level. So you will be able to, let's say for one of those managerial reports, you don't really want them to see payroll detail, but you want them to see the total payroll expense for the department or division. And so let's say all your payroll accounts begin with 5-1, your payroll expense accounts. You can go in and say, I want to filter on 5-1 star account, but starting at the second level. And so they're going to see those balance numbers both on their Excel statements report and on the first level drill down where there isn't much detail. But when they drill down to GL detail, they're not going to see that detail. They're not going to see those rows that were for any account starting with 5-1. And then obviously those rows won't be there for them to drill down into the batches either. And the batches will, if they drill down to a batch that did have one of those accounts, that won't show up when they drill down to the batch either. So we're going to begin beta testing on that later this month. And if you're not already on the list, let me know. So I'm just going to do a little demo of some of that. So let me get my little cheat sheet here where I was starting. Okay, so admin. So what I was showing you was mostly here, but this won't be enabled if you're not an admin to save these as defaults for any new users. And again, that's not going to override any users who've already set their own defaults, any existing users. But that won't be enabled if you're not an Excel statements admin. And then the system setup, this is the screen I had some screenshots of. So again, you're not going to see this button, you're not going to see this button, and this is going to be disabled, and this is going to be disabled. And so this is the remove inactive user screen I was talking about. And so you can delete, that user or users that are no longer using Excel statement, and that will free up a license for another user. And just, click down there after you selected the ones you're deleting. And then the security, again, this is to set up if you want to use modular security, and then compartmental security. And for setting up those filters, we let you do that from an Excel sheet, so you can easily copy and paste and the like in here, and then click update, and it's going to update those. And if you're an Excel statements admin, it used to be when version 2 first came out, it would bypass this if you're an admin, no matter what. And we had people say, well, in setting that up, I want to test and see how it works as myself. So it will, you can filter yourself now, but as an admin, you can still come back in here and just change that. And when you first open this screen, it's going to automatically have asterisks in here for you. And in version 3, if you have the project option, there's a similar screen for setting filtering on project. And then, where am I? So I mentioned this add columns. And so if you're an admin, this button will be enabled where you can go in and say, oh, we always use AP doc user one for parent company, and we've got that customized on our screens. You know, you'd want to go in and set that up in here, you know, and call it parent company, and then click all users and click add. And then the other difference is if you click report and you're an admin, the report is going to show you all users who set up any added columns, as opposed to if you're not an admin, it's just going to show you what you set up for yourself. Okay, so any questions on that? On being an admin and what you can do? Okay, and then Excel stuff. So yeah, Control-Shift-A. So what I was talking about with it automatically naming, by default, the name level here, when you first open this, is going to be at the workbook level. And you'll see it will add a name when I click insert here. So if I go back to that cell, this is the name box in Excel. So it's showing me the range I have selected, which is that one cell, is named company ID. And workbook level means that name is visible across all worksheets or tabs in this workbook. If instead you change the scope to worksheet, then it's only going to be visible within this particular worksheet or tab. And so it's still going to be named company ID, but if you go to another worksheet and you say company ID, it's not going to find this one. It's going to be looking for the name company ID either for the whole workbook or if you've set it on that particular worksheet as well. So that's how it inserts these. So I can insert ledger ID, and it's named that ledger ID. So I'm going to insert, since I talked about this, I'm going to insert a drop-down list, and let's do it. This demo, we call it the Solomon demo data because it's so old. This has 6 segments, which I doubt anyone out there has, but I can select one or more of these, and I'm inserting as a drop-down list. And as soon as you insert something as a drop-down list, it creates a structures sheet if you didn't already have one. And that then is the combination of all of those. In this case, I chose location and sales type. And so we have the combination of all the different locations and sales type, including all, and then all with location with each sales type, and then each sales type, each location with an all sales type as well. And if you don't want some of these, you know, it's easy enough just to go in here and, you know, uncheck ones that you don't want from any of these filters. And you can also edit this, and that's why we did it as an Excel sheet, so you can go in and edit this. So if you always look at, I don't know, Atlanta and, no, that's not really, let's say just French speaking. So you just look at Canada and France together. You can go ahead and, I'll just go grab this, Control C, and I'll go add that to the list for Canada all. So just paste it in. And so now it's saying when you select this choice, it's going to show me both Canada and France, because that's now a list of masks in there. And then I would probably rename this. And then that's going to appear in your drop-down list with the name you've given it. And then this is what it's going to combine for you. And then you can go ahead and obviously delete the ones that you're replacing with that. You can actually delete the whole row, or you can just go and uncheck it in here. So that one, right? And that's where this drop-down list is coming from. Let me just go widen this. So that's coming from that list, and you can see that the one that we put in there, and then that drops that mask in to the cell that's named sub-account. And so the Control-Shift-A, well, let me show you, yeah, let's do that. So equals PTD val, And I just have to type enough that it can find the function. And those are all the Excel functions that start with P, but there are no Excel functions starting with PT. So as soon as I type PT, if I now hit tab, since there's only one choice in that list down there, the highlighted choice, I hit tab, then it finishes entering that for me. And then if I do Control-Shift-A, and you have to be at that point with that opening paren, then that lists out all of the parameters for this particular function. And because we named those cells, or we let XLstatements name those cells, it knows where to find those. And you notice these are color-coded as well. So that's the Control-Shift-A. And that's why for my fiscal year and period, I name those cells fiscal year, just like it has here, and period. And you can do the same with these if you want to. You have to pick up those little tick marks, which are not the greater than and less than signs. We're trickier than that. But if you copy this out and name a cell with that, you can then have a cell in here that we'll name with that. And I guess maybe I'm wrong. I know I've done this. I'm not sure what I've done wrong here. It doesn't like that as a name. Okay, that must be after we put those tick marks in. So, but you can give them your own names and then use that name in the function. So insert function here, and that's the easiest way to get to it. You can also go here and click it. It's a bigger one here. So if you've got bad eyesight, you can use that one. Or as I mentioned, you can use Shift F3 as well. But if I do this, then I go down to my XLstatements category, then this is a list of all my XLstatements functions. And then if I choose one, it's going to be, it's giving you a little help on these down here, more help for one of the more complex ones. And if I click OK, then it's entering it for me. And then it says, oh, what do you want to use in these arguments? And so Control-Shift-A isn't working for me here. So I would have to type in, company ID. And you notice it goes and finds that cell and tells me what's in that cell as well. So it's kind of neat. So this is your online help. And in version 3, this little URL or link is going to work as well. And so that'll take you directly into more complete documentation on each function from here. So it's a good idea to know about this because that's your context-sensitive help on the functions as well. So if I go back to what are we doing here? Equals PTD bell, Control-Shift-A. Yeah, so I guess probably talked about that enough. Oh, let's put something in here. So, yeah, and I know I don't have an account in there, and I don't have a fiscal year and period, but let's go do that. Oops. And when you name a cell by using the name box like that, that's always going to be across the whole workbook. That's going to be work group scope. Oh, and you notice when I enter, I put the little tick mark in front of it. That causes Excel to say, oh, that's not really a number. That's text, which is true of something like an account number. And so that's how XLstatements does it too. If you insert the chart of accounts, or you'll see up here as well, it puts that in front of it. So that's not visible because it's an indicator to Excel that to see that as a text value. Because otherwise, if you put 0060 in, it's just going to show as 60. If I type 0060, it says, oh, that's a number, and we don't care about leading zeros. And so you can go and you can change that to be text. You can tell it that's going to be text. It should be in this little summary. There we go. And then if I put 0060 in, then that'll work. But if you start doing this, it can cause some interesting effects. If you start changing the cell formats to text, something like a formula is not going to work the way you would expect. So we just use that little tick mark instead. So what are we missing here? If I go here, it's going to color code. Yeah, so it doesn't know where to get my account. And then I use the F4 key to cycle through all the combinations of absolute and relative. Okay, so we've actually got a number there. And that one doesn't have to have anything in it. Oh, that's because of this. I'm going to go back and say all sub-accounts. And I did not actually select it. There we go. Yeah, so if I do a Shift F3 now, then it brings me right into that screen. And like I said, this is nice if you want to use one of those optional parameters. But you could, here we said, oh, 2 is going to show you batches that are released but not posted. And it's telling you that, oh, net, that's not here. But let's say we wanted just credits. Okay, then it's basically saying C is credits only. And again, I don't have to count commas then. It automatically puts the correct number of commas in to get to the right position for that argument. Okay, and so this is credits only. There we go. And so that's being a cash account, that may be the actual balance, but no, there should be some debits in there too. So if I go and take this out again, yeah, so that number changes because we have both debits and credits out there. Yeah, for one thing, you can see this particular sub-account nets to 0, but when I change that to just credits, then it's going to show me just the credit side of that. So there's a debit in there for $1,000 as well, but we're not seeing that because we asked for just credits. Okay, so what else? Is this helpful for people? Is everybody asleep? Okay. Undocumented. Yeah. So a real biggie here is on insert from SL. So let's say you wanted to enter a column of your account classes. So we're going to say, yeah, we're going to insert as a column here, and from consolidation, we're going to enter our, we're going to make a list of our account classes. So with nothing selected in here, you notice the insert is still enabled. It's going to go ahead and insert. What happened? Yeah, okay. It's going to insert, and because I've got include on inactive unchecked, so these are just account classes that exist in the company, in the database that I'm in. And because this is the consolidation tab, this is showing you actually across all databases. And so we make our list that way, and account classes, like I said, you can put a description in for each, and then there's an Excel statement function to go and get that for you. And then you would use the C argument, that quote C unquote, in that third optional argument, and then it would know, oh, that's not the account we're looking at, that's the account class. And account classes are in GL. You can set them up here. Dynamics SL doesn't have any to start out with, but you go create them in here. So you come up with an ID and a name, and then in your chart of accounts, class ID, you put the correct class ID in for every one of your accounts. And a nice thing about this also is if you add accounts to your chart, as long as you put them in the right account class, they're automatically going to show up in the right place on your summary report or your consolidated report. And then these are consolidation accounts and consolidation sub-accounts. They're out there also in your chart of accounts maintenance. You've got a 10-character free field, which by default, it's going to put the account number in when you set up an account number. But you can create a dummy chart of accounts for consolidating parent company that you don't actually have that company in Dynamics SL, but you want to consolidate into it, and then put its chart of accounts numbers in here for all of your charts of accounts in all of your company databases, and it's then going to combine them into, and that's typically a many to one. So you might have a bunch of detail accounts in a subsidiary that you want to be summarized at the parent. So you'd put the same parent account number over here. And again, you've got the same thing in sub-account, except it's 24 characters long. And unfortunately, they don't have sub-account classes like they have account classes. So you'd have to use this. But these don't have to be numbers or anything either. So you can have a consolidation sub-account called, sales, marketing, administration, and then just combine the sub-accounts from your dissimilar companies into those that you want to see at the parent level. Okay, so when I entered, when I click this, these boxes are automatically sorted by the first column. But if I double click in here, it's going to resort by each column in order. And this third column for account class, this is the first account in the current company that's used with that account class. And so if you want these to come out in chart of accounts order, which would be typical in a financial report, you just need to double click in here to get them sorted by your chart of accounts number. And then when you insert them, they're going to insert in that order. Okay, so they're going to be in the order that you want. You don't have to restack these. That's just one example. If I just keep double clicking, it just moves from column to column and back to the first one again. And again, you can do that in any of these boxes. So, companies, let's say you're inserting a column of companies, that would sort by names. This would sort by database and so forth. And when you're inserting as a drop-down, a row, or a column, these are then multi-selectable. So you can say, oh, I want to insert a row because I want to look at these three companies. I want a column for each of those. So I'm going to insert those as a row. And I've selected just those three. And so it puts the company ID and the company name in. And you notice this automatically changes. By default, it says it's going to put the names on the right. But I'm entering these as a row, so that wouldn't make sense. And so it just changes to below, but you could have changed that to above to put the name above those. And then, you refer to that company ID in your PTD bow, Control-Shift-A. For company ID, I'm going to use the one that's correct for this column, F4. F4 says always get it from row 5, but relative to what column I'm in. And then for account, in this case, I'm going to say, I'm going to use the account class and F4, F4, F4. So always get it from column I. And then for my console, tell it that I'm using account class. Company 10 doesn't have much in it. But company 60 does, company 70 does. So, you've created your summary report instantaneously. And the fill handle, so the lower right hand corner of a selection, that when it changes to that little plus sign, that's the fill handle. And I can copy like that. This isn't going to work until I delete this column. And then if I double click on the fill handle, it's going to copy down until it sees nothing on its left, which is why I had to delete that empty column. Otherwise, it wouldn't have copied down. So it's actually looking at the previous column to my selection and then just stopping at the bottom of that, which is exactly what you want it to do, right? So real nice functionality to use with Excel statements. Okay. And let's see, I think that covers, aside from non-zero range. So I've got that range selected. I'll set it as a non-zero range. And now it's automatically hiding rows 11 and 13. And that enables this little button up here as well. So this isn't enabled unless you have set a non-zero range. And the non-zero ranges are kept with worksheets. And those are remembered. If you save a workbook and reopen it, it will remember. And it'll remember whether you had hide or show enabled when you saved it as well. Okay. And then what I was talking about in version 3 is, in version 2.5, I double click on this, it's just going to show me drill down from that particular row. And in version 3, if I double clicked anything up on this header row, it's then going to give me detail for everything here. And I can go in and say, I want to filter it. I don't want to see, those two accounts, and that will filter this out this table. And then I double click on the header. It's just going to show me the accounts that are left in here. And of course, I can display them again by going in here and selecting all again. So that's nice functionality that was suggested by a user. So Q&A, anybody want to talk about anything or have questions or want to know how to do something?
Yeah, Jonathan, I had a quick question. When you set the data such as the company ID and the fiscal year period, etc., as a workbook, is that automatically inherited if you have a second, third, and fourth worksheet?
Yes.
Does it know automatically to go back to that?
Yeah, if it's in the workbook scope, then every worksheet is going to be able to see that. And the only way to override that, if you enter it here, if you want to play with that, then you can define a name yourself and tell it what scope the name should be. Okay, it should be on, in this case, my worksheets are named sheet 1 and structured. So do I want that name just for sheet 1 or just for structures? And again, the default is workbook. I usually use the name manager just because I'm that technical. And so this shows you all of the names and the ones that were added by Excel statements. It even gives you a little note showing you that.
And if you set the sub accounts as drop downs, so I have a departmental sheet, several departmental sheets in a workbook. If I set the sub account to a drop down list, I can pick that a particular element out of that drop down list on sheet 3 or 4 on the admin department or accounting department. It'll automatically look back to that cell, whatever that cell is, A5.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, or you can drop it in. That's a good question. I think the drop down has got to be for the whole workbook. But yeah, that's what you're asking. I don't think you can make a different drop down for sub accounts on separate worksheets because there's no way for the structures to know.
No, it's not for. I want a worksheet that is the accounting department's budget.
Yep.
And actual, and a worksheet that is for the sales, and a worksheet for the engineering. So those worksheets will go back when you select the period to date balances. that worksheet will go back and look at a drop-down element from the main sheet where it was set up and
Yes.
as a workbook drop-down. Okay.
Yeah. We actually, if you want to create a separate, if you're doing the budgeting in the accounting department, and you want a separate tab for each department that's getting budgeted, you can, if you have a drop-down, then this will be enabled here. And you could say create entry sheets as worksheets, and it's going to take everything in your drop-down, and it's going to create a separate sheet for each statically. And if, on the other hand, you have managers creating their own budgets, you can say create a separate workbook for every department, everything in my
Right.
drop-down, and then you can send those workbooks out to the managers for them to fill in. And the clients I know who are doing that, they put in their proposed budget, and then they let the managers make changes to that, and then sent back, and then they argue for a while, and then when it's ready, then the person in accounting will then click the update ledger on it. The managers don't have this button enabled, obviously, because you haven't given them rights to delete budget on the budget maintenance screen in Dynamics SL. Yeah, but it'll automatically create entry sheets as well. So there's a site I set up a couple years ago where they needed a separate workbook for each department head, but each department head was then budgeting for each separate location under that. So each department head had numerous locations that they were budgeting for. And so what we did was we said, okay, first we're going to create a drop down by department, and we're going to make a workbook for each of those. And then we opened each one of those workbooks, and we set a drop down for location. And then we went in and we said, okay, now make worksheets, entry sheets for worksheets for those. And in about 2 minutes, we had 10 budget entry sheets for each one of those department heads with a tab for each one of their locations that they were budgeting by.
Okay.
So any other questions, ideas? I know there are other people out there. If you may need to turn off your mute. Okay, well, we're at the end of the hour in any case. So I do have a recording of this, and I'll put that out on our YouTube channel. Our YouTube channel is just called XL Statements out on YouTube. Okay, well, thanks everybody for being here, and I hope maybe we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Yeah, bye-bye.